summary of the report leveraging the opportunities of neglected and underutilized crops for nutrition and climate resilience. This report, or summary of the report, is thanks to our friends at the Center for Development Research at the University of Bonn. And it's interesting. So the report begins with a recap of the state of the world, right, in nutrition terms. And of course, we all know that there is malnutrition out there. Less known is the actual number of people that are going through it, right? So about they estimate 700 million. I've seen a number as high as 900 million people, according to the FAO, that are facing chronic hunger. 3 billion of us. So even this is just not the developing world, but also the developed world suffer micronutrient deficiencies. So that means that yes, you do eat, and yes, you satisfy your hunger, but it doesn't mean you're correctly nourished, right? So, and that means the full profile of vitamins and healthy fats and all that stuff. And we'll get more into it as we read on in the report. But that's what that's referring to, right? And over 2 billion people are affected by overweight or obesity. It used to be that that was just a developed country phenomenon, but that now is more and more the case all around the world. We all know about high obesity levels, for example, in Mexico, right? And of course, it's mostly due to poor diets, right? That the expansion of poor diet. Europe used to be fairly immune to that. That is also changing. Now their obesity rates are up pretty much in every single country in Europe. So something to be on the lookout for. Now, food systems are unique in that they touch pretty much every aspect of human existence on the planet. So climate change and land degradation are reducing crop yields. That's fairly known, right? Straightforward. It has been known for a while. And so, according to the authors of this report, addressing these challenges requires building resilient and sustainable agri-food systems that provide nutritious diets. So they're adding on the health component to food, which that makes everything a lot more complicated when you're trying to do this, because for the most part, whenever an agricultural policy is enacted or thought of, the people enacting it or designing it are thinking of farmers, right? What's in the benefit of farmers? They're not thinking of, well, also we have to focus on the fact that the product of these agricultural production activities are going to end up on the tables of consumers. And so we also have to worry about them, right? And so basically, the report is positing that neglected and underutilized crops, or NUCs, right, are the way to go. And so neglected and underutilized crops, or NUCs, are characterized by their limited geographic distribution, and we'll get a little bit more into it as to what these are. And something that again, the alarm bell for this has been sounded as early as about 15 years ago, right? I remember reading when I was about to go into university, and during all through my undergrad and then during my grad, the first degree, I remember that this was already a problem. And so, less known, I think, by people is that about 75% of the calories all of us humans consume on the planet come from about three crops, really, right? Which is corn, rice, and wheat. And then, of course, you've got soy and sorghum, but that's to varying degrees, and it depends if you eat animal protein or not in your diet, right? Um, and so the report highlights, right, that the monotonous consumption of only a few staple crops also fails to adequately nourish populations and ultimately leads to malnutrition, as I was just mentioning. And so what they're trying to do with NUCs is bridge the gap between food and nutritional security. That is, in this case, their area of focus is Africa, right? And they're going to mention some countries, and we'll go through them. I did want to also stop and focus a little bit on what the World Health Organization defines as a healthy diet. And I thought, wow, I myself personally don't think I meet this requirement on a daily basis. So I'd be curious to find out if you guys think that you meet you have a healthy diet according to the definition of the World Health Organization. But in broad strokes, it says that the daily recommended daily intake should be about 2,500 calories. I know for a fact that I do not consume 2,500 calories daily on a daily basis. 400 grams of this should come from vegetables and fruits. That is not the case for me, and I'm ashamed to report. Daily intake should be about 5 to 35% of daily intake. Oh, protein should be about that. That requirement I do think I meet for the most part on a daily basis. Fat intake should be at most 30% of your total energy consumption. Um, that one's hard to say, to be honest. Some days I think I hit that mark, some days I don't. It's just, it is what it is. My carbohydrate intake is about 45 to 65% of my daily intake. For sure, that is not the case for me. I'm on a special type of diet, so I know for a fact I don't meet that requirement. Um, yeah, so free sugar should account for less than 10% of your daily intake, ideally less than 5%. So that one for sure. I don't really consume sugar. I try to stay away from that kind of thing. Occasionally, I'll indulge about once a week, but yeah, for the most part, I eat pretty clean. Also, you should have minerals, so iron, sodium, zinc, iodine, which is obviously important for your thyroid, magnesium, vitamins A, B complex, C, D, E, and K, and then your salt intake should be less than 5 grams per day. So I'd be curious to find out if you guys think that you meet this requirement. So it's a pretty, I mean, that's ideally how you should eat, but it's pretty out there, right? So um, the report goes on to mention, right, that many African governments have prioritized productivity of mainstream cereals like maize, rice, wheat, like we discussed, obviously because the rest of the planet is eating that, and because it serves as a basis for livestock, right? So you can feed this to chickens. Rice is like a pretty all-encompassing staple crop. Pretty much, I think everybody eats rice, every culture, I mean, right, in some quantity. Um, yeah, and so there's other crops that are, indigenous to these African countries that they're about to mention. So millets, teff, fonio, and sorghum. Sorghum is widespread throughout Latin America. I've seen that. And then they mentioned something about agroecological conditions to provide commensurable energy, and some of them contain more protein. So let's talk about that these crops are more adapted to agroecological zones. That one's tricky because for the most part, you're producing for the market, not according to agroecological zones. And we'll get into that in another video. And that's, yeah, causing a lot of problems around the world in terms of environmental impacts. So, for example, you might be growing in an area where there's not a lot of water intensive crops. So it creates a lot of problems. And but the point is that having a healthy diet is important for your cognitive development, maintaining a healthy body, skeletal mass, regulating metabolic functions, and strengthening the immune system. Should be fairly obvious, right? Then it goes through a lot of vegetables and what their impacts are when you eat them. And here's something that this is for the most part not a problem, but it is kind of like the focus, right, of these types of reports because it's experts talking to other experts, right? So it says that while scientists, governments, and development partners increasingly recognize the nutritional benefits of NUCs for a healthy diet, for healthy diets, their uptake remains minimal. And the reason is there's not a whole lot out there. Obviously, it talks about that. There's not a whole lot of information. And also, once people try more or less Western type diets, they don't really want to go back to their local diet. And that's where it becomes tricky because, again, it's experts talking to experts without considering the tastes of the local population, right? So, what I'm trying to say is that even if um, these orphan crops or underutilized crops, as they call them here, are developed at a scale large enough that they could actually sustainably, in a sustained fashion, I should say, supply a local market, would people actually buy them? Because if they don't like what's being produced, they're unlikely to buy them, right? To consume them. It's just it is. Now, among the other constraints of adopting NUCs are the limited seed availability. So it's not just a matter of like, oh, I want to produce this. You actually have to have a sustained supply of seed for your farmers. There's not a whole lot of funding for the research into these crops. There's limited advancements in breeding, production, processing, value chain. So all that stuff goes into actual production of crops, right? Inadequate infrastructure, which means like storage, transportation, limited market access, as we said, institutional and knowledge gaps. So governments, right, are staffed by people that have limited knowledge, and it's not like a negative thing. It means that they're experts in like small, reduced areas, and they might not be aware of this stuff, right? So it's on the researchers to make it more aware of what's going on and what other options are available to them to try and have solutions to multiple development problems. In this case, food, agriculture, the environment, and nutrition, right? And so on the demand side, they do recognize, right, that consumers, there has to be some sort of consumer behavioral change. But there are examples of successful NUCs being developed, right? So the Kiziba Community Seed Bank in Uganda, the Seed Savers Network in Kenya. Other, like I said, this is another term for the NUCs, African Orphan Crops Consortium. They try to promote these. They're building opportunities. Cameroon's 2035 vision, like I said, these are the report actually goes into case studies of countries. So Cameroon has a 2035 vision to modernize its agricultural sector. Tanzania, obviously, like most countries in the world, Tanzania's agri-food policies prioritize corn, rice, beans, and sunflower, which are their cash crops and staple crops. And then the report ends with making 10 policy recommendations, right? So one of them is increased, an oldie but a goodie, increased investment in multilateral collaboration, research and development of infrastructure, including breeding stations, processing facilities. So the infrastructure part, investing in communication strategies to try to enact or foster social behavior so people will actually consume these crops. And yeah, the other ones that caught my attention were extended international markets for NUCs. So they're also thinking about international trade. So if like there's a crop out there that perhaps farmers would be more enticed to grow if they knew that they had like an international market to try and bring in foreign money into their local economy, and then just take insights from other crops, right? So this has happened before in Latin America and Ethiopia apparently, and so yeah, I just thought it was a neat report, but it's not new by any means. I've heard about orphan crops and the fact that they want to grow them for a long time. But again, yeah, just to also, I guess, emphasize that change, no matter what type of change, if you're going to do a fundamental paradigm shift, it takes time, right? Time and investment. And those seem to be two resources that are in short supply given ongoing geopolitical movements on the planet. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think. And you can find the link to the full report down below. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. And yeah, let's keep the conversation going.